I mentioned in that opening clip that the polis was the hallmark of Greek civilization. So we should probably establish what a polis is. In some ways, a polis is the Greek word for a city-state, excuse me. And so in kind of a physical sense, that means it's a town or it's a city and the land around it. But that's kind of the $5 definition. And what I like to consider the $100 definition of polis, and by the way, plural is poleis rather than polises. The $100 definition is more that it's the political organization of the city and the people who live in it and their ideals and everything that relates to politics and culture and society and religion that goes on in it. It's kind of the identity of these people as well. So if we're thinking about what poleis are, they're small, independent communities that in some ways are kind of like the Mycenaean culture from last lecture. They tend to be dominated by men of particular backgrounds, and membership to that polis is hereditary. In other words, it can't be passed to somebody outside of the family. So the people who are members of the polis are considered citizens. And these folks are an elite group that don't include a whole bunch of people that would be there as well. Slaves, peasants, women, people who are foreigners who are living there. And so in some ways, when we think about ancient Greece, we tend to think about, hey, they gave us democracy. But it's important to remember that it's still a really small group of people that is running the show here. The polis itself, in its physical sense, develops out of that area that we saw with Mycenaean civilization. Originally, it's a defensible area where farmers and other people outside of the city could hole up during an attack. And a really good example of that is here in this image. This is the Acropolis in Athens. And so the particular part of the polis that is defensible, that's in the air, like an acrobat, is the Acropolis. Over time, these towns grow into kind of defensible areas, and they develop some very particular features to them. They all have marketplaces called agoras, where, people do shopping and trading, but it's also kind of the communal heart of the city, where people hang out and swap news and rumors. Other physical elements that these poleis have, they all have temples and altars. You'll remember from last lecture that these folks worship the same pantheon of gods, but have particular gods for each polis. They have gymnasia for exercising, and here's a little bit of maybe Jeopardy knowledge for you. Gymno as a prefix. If any of you are ag science majors, you might know about gymnosperms. Gymnosperms are plants that don't have a shell around their seeds. In other words, the seeds are naked. So folks at the gymnasium are working out in the nude, remember, because physical body is a reflection of God's. They have theaters for plays, and that means that everybody is very much involved in all aspects of this. Most poleis were probably a couple hundred people, maybe a few thousand. Athens is really the outlier. It gets up to probably 250,000 at its absolute height. One thing to keep in mind here is that people who are in these poleis, especially male citizens in the poleis, very much see an obligation to governing well. One way to maybe think about this is that these folks don't see themselves as having rights, but they have duties. Duties to participate in government, duties to protect the city, and they actually came up with a word for people who didn't fulfill those duties. They called them in Greek idioti. So the root of that is obviously the same as our root for idiot. The real takeaway from this is that you could go to a different polis and you could see all the same features. And you could recognize that people there had a certain identity and you could feel familiar. But at the same time, each polis is unique. And they have slightly different variations on government and religion that make them the same, but also kind of make them different from each other.